Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Beneath the Surface. Vincent Morrison had always been a man who observed more than he spoke. At 42, his weathered hands told the story of someone who'd built everything from the ground up, while his steel-gray eyes missed nothing. Most people saw a quiet contractor who ran a modest construction business in suburban Colorado. They had no idea that Vincent Morrison was much more than he appeared. 20 years ago, Vincent had been Vincent Kozlov, a name that carried weight in certain circles of Eastern Europe. He'd spent his youth learning skills that polite society preferred to forget existed, skills that had kept him alive when lesser men died in the shadows of Prague and Budapest. When he'd finally walked away from that life, he'd chosen anonymity in America, a new identity, and the hope of something resembling peace. He'd met Brianna Walsh at a community college where he was taking business courses. She was studying early childhood education, all golden hair and bright smiles, the kind of woman who seemed to glow with an inner light that had been foreign to Vincent's dark world. She represented everything clean and hopeful that he'd never thought he could have. Their son Tyler, now 16, had his mother's easy smile but his father's watchful eyes. Vincent had worked hard to give them a normal life. The suburban house with the white fence, the family vacations, the illusion of ordinary happiness. Brianna worked at a daycare center. Vincent's construction business thrived through word of mouth and meticulous work, and Tyler excelled in both academics and wrestling. But Vincent had always known that peace was temporary. In his experience, betrayal was not a matter of if, but when. The first crack in his carefully constructed world had appeared 6 months ago. Brianna had started working late more often, her phone buzzing with texts that made her smile in ways that had nothing to do with daycare business. She'd become more critical of Vincent, more distant, as if she were building a case against their marriage in her own mind. Her brother Derek had always been a problem. 3 years younger than Brianna, Derek Walsh worked in middle management for a tech company and carried himself like he owned the world. He'd never hidden his disdain for Vincent, making snide comments about blue-collar work and constantly pushing Brianna to aim higher. Derek drove a leased BMW, lived in an overpriced downtown loft, and treated every family gathering like an opportunity to showcase his supposed superiority. What Derek didn't know was that Vincent's construction business was just the visible tip of an iceberg. Through a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts, Vincent controlled significant real estate holdings across 3 states. He'd learned long ago that appearing smaller than you could be the greatest advantage of all. The family trip to California had been Brianna's idea, a long weekend to visit her cousin Miranda in Los Angeles. Derek had immediately invited himself along, and then things had gotten interesting. When booking flights, Derek had purchased first-class seats for himself and Brianna, while somehow managing to only buy bus tickets for Vincent and Tyler. "Did you expect a private jet?" Brianna had laughed when Vincent questioned the arrangements, her voice carrying a cruel edge he'd never heard before. Derek had smirked from across their kitchen table. "A 12-hour bus ride suits your pay grade, Vince." Vincent had said nothing, had simply nodded and helped Tyler pack for what his son assumed would be a normal family trip. But as he'd watched his wife and her brother head to the airport, leaving him and Tyler to board a Greyhound bus, Vincent Morrison began a plan. The bus ride gave him 12 hours to think, 12 hours to observe Tyler's growing resentment at his mother's behavior, and 12 hours to make some very discreet phone calls to people who owed him favors from his previous life. By the time they reached Los Angeles, Vincent had confirmed what he'd suspected for months. His wife was having an affair, and Derek wasn't just enabling it. He was actively facilitating it. The lover was Lucas Reed, a fitness instructor at an upscale gym where Derek held a membership and had introduced his sister. Lucas was 28, all muscles and charm, exactly the kind of man who specialized in bored housewives with money. What made it worse was the systematic nature of their deception. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a crime of passion. This was calculated, planned, with Derek serving as both enabler and conspirator. They'd been using Derek's downtown loft for their meetings, had even taken a weekend trip to Denver together while Vincent was supposedly working out of town. Tyler had noticed too. Vincent caught his son watching Brianna with growing suspicion during their first day in Los Angeles. Saw the way Tyler's jaw tightened when Derek made another disparaging comment about Vincent's work. "Dad," Tyler had said that evening as they sat by the pool at their budget hotel while Brianna was shopping with Derek, "something's not right." Vincent had looked at his son, really looked at him. Tyler had grown into a young man, while Vincent wasn't paying attention, had developed the kind of quiet intensity that reminded Vincent of himself at that age. "I know, son," Vincent had said simply. That's when Vincent made a decision that would change everything. Tyler was old enough for the truth, old enough to choose sides, and smart enough to be an ally in what was coming next. Chapter 2. The Art of Observation. The second day in Los Angeles, Vincent and Tyler played the role of tourists while conducting surveillance that would have impressed Vincent's former colleagues. They visited the beach, toured Hollywood, ate overpriced food, and documented everything their wife and mother thought she was hiding. Brianna had claimed she was spending the day with her cousin Miranda, shopping and catching up. Derek had said he was meeting old college friends for a golf game. Both lies were easily exposed with patience and the right vantage points. Vincent had taught Tyler how to be invisible in plain sight, how to use reflection in storefront windows to watch without being seen, how to follow without being followed. The boy was a natural, inheriting not just Vincent's observational skills, but his capacity for cold analysis. They watched Brianna meet Lucas Reed at a beachside cafe in Malibu. The personal trainer was exactly what Vincent had expected. Tall, lean, artificially tan, with the kind of practice smile that had probably launched 1,000 affairs. He drove a red Mustang convertible that screamed midlife crisis compensation. "That's him, isn't it?" Tyler had asked, his voice carefully controlled as they observed from across the street. "Yes," Vincent had confirmed, photographing the couple with a telephoto lens as they held hands and shared intimate conversation over lunch. But it was what happened next that truly revealed the scope of the betrayal. Derek had arrived at the cafe an hour later, joining Brianna and Lucas for what was clearly a planning session. Vincent watched through his camera lens as Derek pulled out his laptop, showing them something on the screen that made all three of them smile. Through careful positioning and a directional microphone Heed had shipped to their hotel, Vincent was able to capture fragments of their conversation. They were planning something beyond the affair, something that involved Vincent's construction business, his bank accounts, and what Derek kept calling the exit strategy. "Tyler," Vincent had said quietly as they drove back to their hotel, "how would you feel about spending your senior year living somewhere else?" His son had looked at him with those watchful eyes. "Depends on where and why. Because sometimes when people betray you, the only response is to make sure they can never do it again." Tyler had nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" That evening, while Brianna claimed to have a headache and went to bed early, Vincent had made a series of phone calls from the hotel's business center. The first was to his lawyer in Colorado, instructing him to begin certain legal preparations. The second was to his accountant, with very specific instructions about asset protection. The third was to a private investigator named Rodriguez, who specialized in cases involving infidelity and fraud. The fourth call was to a number he hadn't dialed in 15 years. "Dmitri," Vincent had said when the familiar voice answered. "It's Vincent." Vincent Kozlov. The Russian accent was thick with surprise. "I heard you were dead. Vincent Morrison now, and I need a favor. You saved my nephew in Bratislava. Name it. I need someone watched, and I need information. The kind of information that comes from computers and phones. Still making people disappear? Still making people wish they had." By the end of the evening, Vincent had set in motion a plan that would systematically dismantle the lives of everyone who had betrayed him. But first, he needed to return home and let them think they'd won. The next morning brought a surprise that even Vincent hadn't anticipated. Brianna announced that she was extending her stay in Los Angeles for another week. "Miranda really needs me right now," she said, not meeting Vincent's eyes. "She's going through a rough divorce, and I feel like I should be here for her." Derek had nodded supportively. I can stay too. Help coordinate some business meetings out here. Vincent had smiled the understanding smile of a devoted husband. Of course. Tyler and I will head back. You take care of family. As he'd hug his wife goodbye at the airport, Vincent had whispered in her ear, I love you, Brianna. Remember that. She looked puzzled by the comment, but Vincent was already walking away, Tyler at his side, ready to begin the real work. The bus ride home gave Vincent 24 hours to finalize his plans. By the time they reached Colorado, he had identified every weakness in his enemies' lives, every pressure point that could be exploited, every relationship that could be turned into a weapon. Brianna wanted out of their marriage. She'd get out, but she'd leave with nothing, and she'd spend the rest of her life regretting the day she decided to betray Vincent Morrison. Derek thought Vincent was beneath him. He was about to learn exactly what Vincent Morrison was capable of. And Lucas Reed, the pretty boy trainer who thought he could steal another man's wife, he was going to discover that some men's wives came with a price that few were prepared to pay. Chapter 3. Setting the Board. The Morrison house felt different when Vincent and Tyler returned from Los Angeles. Without Brianna's constant chatter and Derek's periodic visits, the silence revealed truths that had been hidden beneath domestic routine. Vincent walked through each room, seeing everything with fresh eyes. The credit card bills Brianna had hidden in her jewelry box, the second cell phone tucked behind books on her nightstand, the receipts for expensive lingerie that she'd never worn for him. Tyler found the laptop she'd forgotten to take, and Vincent spent an hour extracting its contents with software that officially didn't exist. Deleted emails painted a picture of an affair that had been planned for months, complete with discussions about divorce strategy and asset division. Lucas had been coaching both Brianna and Derek on how to maximize her settlement while minimizing Vincent's ability to retain his business and property. They think you're stupid, Tyler observed, reading over his father's shoulder. That's their first mistake, Vincent replied, copying files to encrypted drives. Never let anyone know how much you actually know. The following week, Vincent played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. He called Brianna every evening, listened to her lies about helping Miranda, sent flowers to Derek's loft where she was actually staying. He even transferred $5,000 to her account when she claimed Miranda needed help with legal fees. Meanwhile, Rodriguez's investigation was providing a wealth of information about Lucas Reed. The personal trainer was drowning in debt, student loans, credit cards, a car lease he couldn't afford, and rent on a Venice Beach apartment that was bleeding him dry. He'd been targeting wealthy women for 2 years, with Brianna being his latest and most promising prospect. Derek's finances were equally precarious. His middle management salary barely covered his expensive lifestyle, and he'd been dipping into company funds to maintain appearances. The BMW was 3 months behind on payments, his loft was leveraged to the maximum, and he'd recently been passed over for a promotion that would have solved his money problems. Both men were desperate, which made them predictable. Vincent's plan began with a simple real estate transaction. Through one of his shell companies, he purchased the building that housed Derek's tech company. The previous owner had been quietly struggling with property taxes and maintenance costs, making Vincent's cash offer impossible to refuse. Derek's company had a 5-year lease with 3 years remaining, but Vincent discovered that the lease contained several overlooked clauses that could be triggered under the right circumstances. Within days of taking ownership, Vincent's property management company began documenting every minor lease violation, every instance of improper usage, every technical breach of the building's regulations. Simultaneously, Vincent made contact with Derek's employer through a consulting contract. Morrison Construction had been hired to evaluate the building's structural integrity and recommend necessary upgrades. Vincent's report, submitted with impressive technical detail and photographic evidence, identified serious safety concerns that would require immediate attention and significant financial investment. The company's executives found themselves facing a choice: spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on building upgrades or relocate their offices within 60 days. With their lease now in jeopardy due to Vincent's documented violations and facing the prospect of expensive building improvements, they chose to relocate. Derek Walsh, whose departmental budget had already been strained by his embezzlement, found himself blamed for the company's sudden facility crisis. The timing couldn't have been worse. His financial irregularities had begun attracting attention from the accounting department, just as his value to the company was being questioned. In Los Angeles, Lucas Reed was discovering that several of his wealthy clients had mysteriously canceled their training sessions. Vincent's network had made discreet contact with these women, sharing carefully edited information about Lucas's pattern of targeting married clients for affairs. The fitness instructor's income dropped by 60% in 2 weeks. But Vincent's masterstroke was still to come. Through Dimitri's technological expertise, Vincent gained access to every digital device owned by his targets. He could read their texts, emails, and private messages. He could track their locations, monitor their calls, and most importantly, he could manipulate their communications. The trap was set when Vincent orchestrated a 3-way betrayal that would destroy all of them simultaneously. Using Derek's laptop, Vincent sent emails to Lucas's other female clients, detailing the trainer's relationship with Brianna and warning them about his pattern of seducing married women. The emails appeared to come from Derek's account, making it seem like Brianna's own brother was sabotaging her affair. At the same time, Vincent used Lucas's phone to send text messages to Derek, thanking him for introducing Lucas to his desperate sister and bragging about how easy it had been to manipulate both Brianna and Derek into funding Lucas's lifestyle. Finally, Vincent sent messages from Brianna's hidden phone to Derek's company executives, using information only Derek could have provided to outline the building's lease problems and suggesting that Derek had been planning this crisis to cover his own financial mismanagement. Within 24 hours, all 3 conspirators were turning on each other with vicious efficiency. Derek accused Lucas of using him to get to Brianna and then betraying him to save his own failing business. Lucas accused Derek of setting him up to take the fall for Derek's embezzlement. Brianna accused both men of using her as a pawn in their schemes. Their alliance crumbled as quickly as it had formed, but the damage was already done. Derek's company fired him and referred his case to prosecutors. Lucas lost his remaining clients and faced eviction from his apartment. Brianna found herself stranded in Los Angeles with no money, no allies, and no way home except to call the husband she'd been planning to divorce. Vincent answered her call on the first ring. "Vincent, I need help," she said, her voice small and broken. "Everything's falling apart here, and I don't know what to do." "Of course, sweetheart," Vincent replied, his voice warm with false concern. "Come home. We'll figure this out together." As he hung up the phone, Tyler looked at his father with something approaching awe. "That's just the beginning," Vincent said quietly. "They wanted to destroy our family for money. Now I'm going to show them what real destruction looks like." Chapter 4. The Return. Brianna's flight landed on a cold Thursday evening in early November. Vincent met her at the airport alone, playing the role of concerned husband with practiced perfection. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the collapse of her carefully planned escape from their marriage. Her designer clothes, purchased with money she'd stolen from their joint account, seemed to hang on her frame like costume pieces from a play that had closed unexpectedly. "Thank you for coming to get me," she said as they drove home through the mountain darkness. "I know things have been complicated lately." Vincent reached over and squeezed her hand, the gesture automatic after 20 years of marriage. "You're my wife, Brianna. Whatever's wrong, we'll fix it." She began to cry then, tears that might have been genuine remorse or simple fear at finding herself trapped. Vincent didn't particularly care which. He let her talk through her sobs, spinning a story about how Derek had gotten involved with bad people and how she'd just been trying to help her brother. Lucas Reed had somehow convinced Derek that Vincent was hiding money, that their marriage was failing anyway, that maybe everyone would be better off if things just ended differently. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered as they pulled into their driveway. "I know I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt you or Tyler." Vincent helped her with her bags, noting that she'd brought back considerably less than she'd taken to Los Angeles. "Where's your brother now?" "I don't know. He won't return my calls. The police want to talk to him about something at his work, and his apartment complex says he hasn't been home in days." She paused at their front door, seeming to steel herself. Vincent, there's something else. Derek borrowed money from some people, and they think I know where he is. This was news to Vincent, though he was careful not to show surprise. Derek's disappearance wasn't part of his plan, which meant his former brother-in-law had escalated the situation beyond simple embezzlement. Tyler greeted his mother with polite distance, accepting her hug but not returning it with any warmth. Over dinner, Vincent watched his son process the subtle lies and half-truths in Brianna's story. Tyler had inherited his father's ability to read people. It was clear he saw through his mother's performance. That night, after Brianna had gone to bed claiming exhaustion, Vincent made a series of phone calls. Rodriguez's investigation revealed that Derek had indeed borrowed money from a loan shark named Bobby Torino, using his sister's affair as collateral. Derek had promised Torino that Brianna would divorce Vincent and split the construction business's assets, with Derek taking a percentage to pay off his debts. When Derek's embezzlement had been discovered and his employment terminated, he'd panicked and tried to disappear. But Torino wasn't the kind of creditor who accepted defaults gracefully. "Dad," Tyler said, appearing in the doorway of Vincent's study. "Are we in danger?" Vincent looked at his son, really looked at him. Tyler was 16 now, old enough for truth, old enough to make decisions about loyalty and family. "Possibly. How do you feel about your mother?" Tyler considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I love her because she's my mom, but I don't trust her anymore, and I don't like who she's become. And if I told you that everything falling apart around us was connected to choices she made with her brother, I'd ask what you need me to do to protect our family." Vincent smiled, recognizing his own ruthless clarity in his son's response. "Pack a bag. Tomorrow, you're going to stay with your Aunt Patricia in Denver for a few weeks. What about school? Your aunt can arrange a transfer to a private school there. Your grades are good enough." Tyler nodded, understanding that this wasn't a discussion but a directive. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to fix this problem permanently." The next morning, Vincent drove Tyler to Denver personally, using the 3-hour trip to explain some truths about their family that he'd hoped never to share. He told Tyler about his past, about the skills he'd learned and the life he'd lived before becoming a Colorado contractor. He explained why they'd always had more money than his business should have generated, why Vincent spoke 4 languages fluently, why he taught Tyler to fight and shoot and think strategically. "Your mother fell in love with the man I pretended to be," Vincent said as they reached Patricia's house. "She never wanted to know who I really was. That was her choice." Patricia Morrison was Vincent's younger sister, the only family member who knew about Vincent's previous life. She'd moved to America 5 years after Vincent, had married a Denver police detective, and had built a legitimate life while maintaining contact with her brother's shadow world. "How bad is it?" Patricia asked as Tyler carried his bags to the guest room. "Bad enough that I need Tyler somewhere safe while I handle it." "And Brianna?" "Brianna made her choice when she decided to betray our family for money." Patricia nodded grimly. She'd never liked Vincent's wife, had always sensed something shallow and opportunistic beneath Brianna's cheerful exterior. "How long do you need?" 2 weeks. Maybe 3. Tyler's a good kid. He'll be fine here." When Vincent returned home that evening, he found Brianna pacing the kitchen with nervous energy. She'd received 2 phone calls during the day, one from a man who claimed Derek owed him money, and another from Lucas Reed begging her to call him back. "Vincent, I'm scared," she said, rushing into his arms. "These people think I have Derek's money, but I don't have anything. And Lucas keeps calling, saying we need to talk, but I don't want to talk to him." Vincent held his wife, smelling another man's cologne faintly in her hair, feeling the tension in her body that came from living a lie for months. "It's going to be okay," he said softly. "I'll take care of everything." That night, as Brianna slept fitfully beside him, Vincent finalized his plan. He would eliminate every threat to his family, settle every debt, and close every door that could lead back to the peaceful life he'd tried to build. But this time, when the smoke cleared, Brianna wouldn't be part of that life. She'd chosen her side when she decided to betray him. Now she would live with the consequences. Chapter 5. Debts and Payments. Bobby Torino operated out of a strip club called Paradise Lost on the industrial side of Denver, surrounded by warehouses and auto repair shops that asked no questions about late-night visitors. Vincent had done business with men like Torino before, predators who fed on desperation and enforced their agreements with violence. Vincent arrived at the club on a cold Friday night, alone and apparently unarmed. He dressed like the construction worker he appeared to be. Work boots, jeans, a heavy jacket that concealed more than it revealed. The bouncer at the door was the size of a small building, all muscle and prison tattoos, designed to intimidate exactly the kind of desperate debtors who usually came looking for Torino. "I need to see Bobby," Vincent told the bouncer calmly. "Bobby don't see nobody without an appointment." Vincent pulled out a photograph of Derek Walsh and placed it on the small table beside the door. "Tell Bobby that Derek Walsh's brother-in-law wants to discuss debt consolidation." 10 minutes later, Vincent was sitting across from Bobby Torino in an office that reeked of cigarettes and cheap cologne. Torino was a small man trying to look big, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't disguise his nervous energy. He had the pale, twitchy appearance of someone who lived entirely at night. "So you're Walsh's brother-in-law," Torino said, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign on his own wall. "You know where that piece of shit is hiding." "Derek's dead," Vincent said matter-of-factly. Torino paused with the cigarette halfway to his lips. "Dead how?" "The kind of dead that happens when someone borrows money from the wrong people and then tries to disappear." Vincent leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. "The question is whether you want to write off his debt or transfer it to his family." "Family meaning you?" "Family meaning his sister. My wife." Torino's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. "Your wife was part of Derek's plan. She was going to divorce you, split your assets, pay off Derek's debt with her settlement. That's what Derek told you. The reality is more complicated." Vincent reached into his jacket, moving slowly so the bouncer standing behind him wouldn't get nervous, and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were photographs. Derek's body in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse, Lucas Reed bound and gagged in the trunk of a car, and several shots of Brianna meeting with both men over the past months. "My wife thought she was having an affair," Vincent said as Torino examined the photos. What she was actually doing was providing information that Derek and his friend could use to plan a robbery. They were going to wait until she filed for divorce, then break into my house while I was supposedly at work, steal everything valuable, and disappear. Brianna was going to claim she was attacked during the robbery, file for an emergency restraining order, and take half my assets as her settlement. None of this was true, but Vincent had learned long ago that the best lies were built on foundations that people wanted to believe. Torino stubbed out his cigarette. "So where does that leave me?" "It leaves you with a choice. You can pursue Derek's debt through his sister, which means dealing with police investigations, insurance claims, and a lot of attention you probably don't want. Or you can accept Derek's debt as payment for a different service." "What kind of service?" Vincent pulled out a second envelope, this one containing $15,000 in cash. "The kind where Derek Walsh and Lucas Reed disappear permanently, and my wife learns what happens to people who betray their families." Torino counted the money slowly, his mind clearly working through the possibilities. "Your wife, she part of this conspiracy, or just stupid?" "Does it matter?" "Might matter to her." Vincent smiled, and something in that expression made even the large bouncer shift uncomfortably. "Bobby, I didn't come here to save my wife. I came here to make sure that everyone who tried to destroy my family pays the appropriate price. And if I say no, then you'll be explaining to the police why Derek Walsh borrowed money from you using his sister's marriage as collateral, and how that led to a complex fraud scheme that resulted in multiple deaths." Vincent stood up, leaving the money on Torino's desk. "But if you say yes, Derek's debt gets paid, 2 problems disappear, and you never have to worry about any of this again." Torino was quiet for a long moment, calculating risks and benefits with the cold precision of a man who'd survived by making brutal decisions quickly. "I'll need proof that it's finished." "You'll have it." "And the woman?" "The woman is my problem." Vincent left the strip club with Bobby Torino's agreement and a timeline. Derek and Lucas would disappear within 72 hours, and Brianna would receive a very personal education about the consequences of betrayal. Driving home through the mountain darkness, Vincent called Rodriguez with specific instructions. The private investigator had been monitoring Brianna's communications since her return from Los Angeles, and the intercepts revealed that she was still planning to proceed with the divorce despite Derek's disappearance. She'd been in contact with a divorce attorney, had opened a separate bank account, and had been secretly photographing and documenting Vincent's possessions for asset division. Even with her brother missing and her lover facing financial ruin, Brianna was still convinced she could somehow salvage her escape plan. That night, Vincent watched his wife sleep and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She'd had multiple opportunities to confess, to choose her family over her conspiracy, to show even a moment of genuine remorse. Instead, she doubled down on her deception, assuming that Vincent was too naive or too weak to discover the truth. In 72 hours, Derek Walsh and Lucas Reed would cease to exist as problems in Vincent's life. But Brianna's education would take longer, would be more personal, and would serve as a permanent reminder of what happened to people who mistook Vincent Morrison's patience for weakness. She'd wanted excitement, drama, and financial security. Vincent was going to give her exactly what she'd asked for. Chapter 6. The education begins. Brianna woke up Saturday morning to find Vincent making breakfast in their kitchen, humming softly as he prepared her favorite meal, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup and fresh coffee. He was dressed casually in jeans and a flannel shirt, looking every inch the devoted husband she'd spent months convincing herself she needed to escape. "This is nice," she said, sliding into her chair at the kitchen table. "What's the occasion? Can't a man make breakfast for his wife without an occasion?" Vincent replied, setting a perfect plate in front of her. As they ate, Vincent played the role of concerned spouse flawlessly. He asked about her nightmares, sympathized with her stress about Derek's situation, and suggested they take a weekend trip to help her relax. "Maybe we could drive up to that bed and breakfast in Aspen," he said. "The one where we stayed for our anniversary 3 years ago." Brianna's face brightened at the suggestion. Though Vincent noticed, she immediately began calculating how a romantic weekend might affect her exit strategy. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "But with everything going on with Derek and these scary phone calls—" "I've taken care of the phone calls," Vincent said simply. Something in his tone made Brianna look at him more carefully. "What do you mean, taken care of?" "I mean, I had a conversation with the people Derek owed money to. They understand the situation now." "Vincent, you didn't pay his debts, did you?" "Because we can't afford." "I didn't pay his debts." Vincent reached across the table and took her hand, his grip gentle but somehow final. "Brianna, there's something we need to discuss. About Derek, about Lucas Reed, about the choices you've been making." The color drained from Brianna's face. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." For a moment, they sat in perfect silence, the weight of 20 years of marriage balanced against months of deception. Vincent watched his wife's mind work, saw her consider and discard various lies, various deflections, various attempts to maintain the fiction that had already crumbled. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "Since before Los Angeles." "And you said nothing?" "I wanted to see how far you would go." Brianna pulled her hand away from his, her breakfast forgotten. "So you set us up? You let me think I was getting away with it just so you could humiliate me?" Vincent smiled, and Brianna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain weather. "Humiliate you?" "Brianna, if I wanted to humiliate you, I would have confronted you in front of Derek and your lover. I would have exposed your affair to your family, your friends, your coworkers. I would have made sure everyone knew exactly what kind of woman you really are. Then what do you want?" "I want you to understand the consequences of betrayal." Vincent stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, where he'd left a manila envelope. When he returned to the table, he spread its contents in front of his wife like cards from a very deadly deck. Photographs. Brianna entering Derek's loft building. Brianna kissing Lucas Reed in restaurant parking lots. Text message printouts planning Vincent's financial destruction. Bank records showing money she'd stolen from their joint accounts. Email exchanges discussing divorce strategy and asset concealment. 20 years of marriage, Vincent said conversationally. 20 years of building a life together, raising our son, creating something that mattered. And you threw it all away for a personal trainer with a drug problem and a brother who sees you as a meal ticket. Brianna stared at the evidence of her betrayal spread across their breakfast table. Lucas doesn't have a drug problem. Lucas Reed has been using cocaine to maintain his energy for training sessions since he started working at that gym. The debt he's accumulated isn't just from poor financial planning. It's from feeding an addiction that costs him $3,000 a month. That's not. Derek never said. Derek has been planning to disappear with your divorce settlement since this whole thing started. He never intended to stay around and help you rebuild your life. He was going to take his cut and vanish, leaving you to explain to everyone why your marriage fell apart. Vincent watched his wife process these revelations, watched her carefully constructed fantasy collapse as she realized how thoroughly she'd been manipulated by the men she'd trusted over her husband. But none of that matters now, Vincent continued, because Derek and Lucas are no longer part of this equation. What do you mean? I mean they've been removed from the situation. Brianna's eyes widened as the implications of Vincent's words sank in. Vincent, what did you do? I solved the problem. Oh God. Oh God. Vincent, please tell me you didn't. Didn't what, Brianna? Didn't protect our family? Didn't eliminate the threats to our son's future? Didn't handle the situation like a man instead of the victim? Vincent leaned back in his chair, completely calm as his wife began to hyperventilate. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack a suitcase with enough clothes for a week. You're going to drive to Denver and check into the Marriott downtown using the reservation I've already made. You're going to stay there until I call you. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what happened to my brother. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the atmosphere of the room, something that made Brianna's survival instinct scream warnings she was only now learning to hear. Your brother tried to destroy our family for money, Vincent said quietly. Your lover participated in a conspiracy to defraud me and leave me broken. You facilitated their plans and betrayed 20 years of marriage and trust. The question isn't what happened to them. The question is what's going to happen to you. Brianna stood up so quickly that her chair fell over. I'm calling the police. And telling them what? That your husband discovered your affair and your conspiracy to defraud him? That the men you were working with have disappeared and you're worried about your own safety? Vincent shook his head. Go ahead, Brianna. Call them. Explain to the investigating officers why you opened a secret bank account, why you've been photographing our possessions, why you hired a divorce attorney while lying to me about working late. She reached for her phone, then stopped as the full scope of her situation became clear. Any investigation would expose her own crimes, her own betrayals, her own carefully laid plans to destroy her husband financially. Pack your bag, Vincent said again. Go to Denver. Wait for my call. And Brianna, she looked at him through tears that contained more fear than grief. Start thinking about what kind of life you want to have when this is over. Because the life you had, the life you threw away for excitement and money, is gone forever. Chapter 7. Closing Circles. The Denver Marriott was exactly the kind of impersonal corporate hotel where someone could disappear without being memorable. Brianna checked in using the reservation Vincent had made, her hands shaking as she signed the registration card. The desk clerk was professionally cheerful, the kind of person trained to notice nothing unusual about guests who paid in cash and seemed reluctant to make eye contact. Room 847 was on the 8th floor, with a view of the mountains that might have been beautiful under different circumstances. Brianna sat on the bed and stared at her phone, trying to decide who she could call for help. Her parents lived in Florida and wouldn't understand the situation. Her cousin Miranda in Los Angeles was dealing with her own divorce crisis. Derek wasn't answering his phone, and she was beginning to accept that he might never answer it again. Lucas was her last hope. Despite everything Vincent had said about drug problems and hidden agendas, Lucas had seemed to genuinely care about her. Maybe he could help her figure out what to do, how to get away from whatever Vincent was planning. She dialed his number and waited through 4 rings before his voicemail picked up. Lucas, it's me. I'm in trouble, and I need to talk to you. I'm at the Marriott downtown in Denver, room 847. Please call me back. She tried calling him 6 more times over the next 2 hours, leaving increasingly desperate messages. By evening, she was pacing the small hotel room like a caged animal, jumping at every sound in the hallway, convinced that Vincent was going to appear at her door at any moment. The knock came at 9:17 p.m. Brianna froze, staring at the door as if it might explode. "Who is it?" "Hotel management, ma'am. We need to speak with you about your reservation." She approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. A man in a hotel uniform stood in the hallway, holding what appeared to be paperwork. He was alone, middle-aged, with the tired expression of someone working a late shift. Brianna opened the door with the chain still attached. "What's the problem?" "Ma'am, there's been an issue with the credit card used to secure your reservation. We need to verify some information. My husband paid for the room in advance." "Yes, ma'am, but the card was flagged by our fraud prevention system. If you could just step out here for a moment so we can verify your identity." Something about the request triggered Brianna's paranoia. "I'm not coming out there. You can verify whatever you need to verify right here." The man nodded understandingly. "Of course, ma'am. Let me just get the manager." He walked away down the hallway, and Brianna closed the door, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. Everything about this situation felt wrong. Her phone rang, and she grabbed it without looking at the caller ID. "Hello, Brianna." Vincent's voice was calm, almost gentle. "How are you settling in?" "Vincent, something's happening here. Hotel management is asking questions about the reservation, and I know. The man in the hallway isn't hotel management." Brianna's blood turned to ice. "What?" "His name is Tony Castellano. He works for the people Derek owed money to. They want to have a conversation with you about your brother's debts." "You set this up. I told you that I solved the problem with Derek's creditors. I never said the solution wouldn't involve you." Brianna sank onto the bed, the phone trembling in her hand. "Vincent, please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm your wife. We can work this out." "Brianna, you stopped being my wife the day you decided to betray our family. What you're now is a loose end that needs to be tied up. What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to experience what it feels like to be powerless, to be betrayed by people you trusted, to have your carefully laid plans destroyed by forces beyond your control." The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Vincent, don't do this. Whatever you're planning, don't do this. Open the door, Brianna." "No, open the door, or Tony will open it for you." Brianna looked around the hotel room desperately, searching for options that didn't exist. The windows didn't open. There was no fire escape, no way out except through the door where Tony Castellano was waiting. "What's going to happen to me?" "That depends on you. Tony and his associates are going to ask you questions about Derek's activities, about money he might have hidden, about people he might have contacted. Answer their questions honestly, and you'll have the chance to rebuild your life somewhere else." "And if I don't?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "Brianna, I spent the first 20 years of my life learning how to make people disappear. I spent the last 20 years trying to forget those skills. Don't make me remember them." The line went dead. Brianna stared at the phone, then at the door, then at the window that showed the lights of Denver 8 floors below. She thought about Tyler, about the son who had looked at her with growing disappointment as her deceptions became obvious. She thought about the life she'd had and the life she'd thrown away for the promise of excitement and easy money. The knock came a third time, followed by a voice that was no longer pretending to be polite. "Mrs. Morrison, we need to talk." Brianna walked to the door and turned the deadbolt. Whatever was about to happen, whatever Vincent had arranged for her, she would face it with whatever dignity she had left. As she opened the door, her last coherent thought was a memory of Vincent making blueberry pancakes that morning, humming softly in their kitchen, looking like the devoted husband she decided wasn't enough for her anymore. Chapter 8. The Weight of Truth. 3 days later, Vincent received a phone call from the Denver Police Department. Brianna Morrison had been found in a parking garage downtown, beaten and unconscious, her purse and identification missing. She was in the hospital with a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and no memory of how she'd gotten there. Vincent played the role of concerned husband perfectly, rushing to the hospital with flowers and terror in his voice. He held Brianna's hand as she drifted in and out of consciousness, whispered reassurances about her recovery, and answered the police detective's questions with exactly the right mixture of confusion and worry. She'd been receiving threatening phone calls about her brother. Vincent explained to Detective Morrison. No relation, despite the name. Derek got involved with some bad people, borrowed money he couldn't pay back. Brianna was scared they might come after family members. Any idea where your brother-in-law might be now? Derek disappeared 2 weeks ago. Brianna tried to help him, but Vincent shrugged helplessly. Derek always made poor choices. When Brianna was finally conscious enough to speak coherently, her story was fragmentary and confused. She remembered checking into the hotel, remembered phone calls, remembered being afraid. But the details were hazy, possibly due to the head injury, possibly due to trauma, possibly due to medications. I think someone was trying to get information about Derek, she told the detective weakly. They kept asking where he was, what he'd done with the money. What money? I don't know. I kept telling them I didn't know anything, but they didn't believe me. Vincent squeezed her hand supportively. The important thing is that you're alive, he said. Everything else can be figured out later. Over the following week, as Brianna recovered in the hospital, Vincent began implementing the final phase of his plan. Rodriguez's investigation had uncovered the full scope of Brianna's betrayal. Not just the affair and the planned divorce fraud, but also a systematic theft of money from their joint accounts over 6 months, forged signatures on business loans, and an attempt to secretly sell Vincent's truck and construction equipment. With this evidence, Vincent's attorney filed for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud, seeking emergency injunctions to freeze Brianna's accounts and prevent her from disposing of any marital assets. The filing included photographs, bank records, text messages, and a detailed timeline of Brianna's criminal activity. By the time Brianna was released from the hospital, she found herself facing not only criminal charges for theft and fraud, but also a divorce proceeding where Vincent was seeking full custody of Tyler and exclusive ownership of all marital property. I don't understand, she said when Vincent visited her at the small apartment she'd been forced to rent with the few $100s left in her personal account. I thought we were going to try to work things out. Vincent looked around the shabby one-bedroom apartment, peeling wallpaper, threadbare carpet, the kind of place where people landed when their lives fell apart completely. Brianna, you tried to steal $47,000 from our joint accounts. You forged my signature on loan documents. You were planning to disappear with Derek and your lover after bankrupting me and destroying Tyler's future. That's not. I never actually took any money. You transferred money to accounts Derek controlled. You used our credit cards to fund your affair. You hired a divorce attorney with money stolen from our son's college fund. Vincent sat down across from her on a couch that looked like it had been salvaged from a garage sale. But none of that is why I'm here. Then why are you here? To give you a choice. Vincent pulled out a legal document and placed it on the coffee table between them. This is a confession detailing your involvement in Derek's embezzlement scheme, your affair with Lucas Reed, and your plan to defraud me through divorce proceedings. Sign it, and I'll make sure the criminal charges against you are reduced to misdemeanors. You'll serve 6 months in county jail, followed by 3 years probation. And if I don't sign, then you'll go to trial for felony fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. With Derek missing and Lucas facing his own criminal charges, you'll be the only defendant left to blame for everything that went wrong. Brianna read through the confession slowly, her face growing paler with each paragraph. This makes it sound like I planned everything. Didn't you? No. Derek came to me with the idea. He said you were hiding money, that you've been lying to me about our finances for years. He said Lucas could help me figure out if I'd be better off divorced. And you believed him. He's my brother. Your brother was planning to disappear with your divorce settlement and leave you holding the bag for his debts. Vincent leaned forward, his voice gentle but implacable. Brianna, Derek used you. Lucas used you. They saw a naive woman who was dissatisfied with her marriage, and they fed you exactly the story you wanted to hear. That's not true. Lucas Reed was arrested yesterday in Las Vegas, trying to board a plane to Mexico with $50,000 in cash and a fake passport. When the DEA searched his apartment, They found enough cocaine to supply a small nightclub and evidence that he'd been running the same con on married women for 3 years. Brianna stared at the confession, tears streaming down her face. What about Derek? Derek Walsh is gone. The people he owed money to have written off his debt as a business loss. Gone where? Vincent looked at his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, with something that might have been pity. Brianna, there are consequences for betraying the wrong people. Derek learned that lesson the hard way. She signed the confession with shaking hands, her signature weak and barely legible. As Vincent folded the document and put it back in his jacket, Brianna made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of her life. What about Tyler? He's my son, too. Tyler made his choice when he saw who you really were. He's staying with my sister until this is resolved. And after I serve my time, can I see him? Vincent stood up, straightening his jacket with the careful precision of a man who had just finished a long and complicated job. Tyler is 16 years old, Brianna. In 2 years, he'll be an adult who can make his own decisions about relationships. If you can rebuild your life into something worth respecting, maybe he'll choose to have a relationship with you. And us? Is there any chance for us? Vincent looked at the woman he'd spent 20 years loving, the woman who had carried his child and shared his bed and promised to stand by him through whatever came. He saw a stranger now, someone whose greed and selfishness had destroyed everything they'd built together. No, he said simply. There's no chance for us. As he walked toward the door, Brianna called after him one last time. Vincent, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I'm truly sorry. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, not turning around. Brianna, if you had come to me 6 months ago and said you were unhappy, that you needed something different from our marriage, I would have done everything in my power to fix it. If you had told me you'd made a mistake with another man, I would have forgiven you and worked to rebuild our trust. Then why? But you didn't choose honesty or forgiveness or second chances. You chose deception and theft and conspiracy. You chose to treat me like an enemy to be destroyed rather than a husband to be trusted. Vincent opened the door, letting in the cold mountain air. Actions have consequences, Brianna. This is yours. Chapter 9, The Price of Peace. 6 months later, Vincent Morrison stood in the kitchen of his newly renovated house, making blueberry pancakes for one. The house felt different now. Cleaner somehow, lighter, as if removing the rot of deception had allowed the space to breathe again. Through the window, he could see the Rocky Mountains in the distance, their peaks white with early spring snow. Tyler had returned from Denver the week before, taller and more serious than when he'd left. The private school had challenged him academically, and living with Patricia had taught him things about family loyalty that couldn't be learned from textbooks. He'd visited Brianna twice during her incarceration, brief meetings in the county jail that had convinced both of them that some relationships couldn't survive certain betrayals. She looks older, Tyler had told Vincent after the second visit. Like she finally understands what she lost. Understanding and accepting are different things, Vincent had replied. Understanding is intellectual. Acceptance is emotional. Most people never manage both. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, with Brianna receiving exactly what she'd brought into the marriage 20 years ago. Nothing. Her conviction for fraud had voided any claim to marital assets, and Vincent's evidence of her systematic theft had been so comprehensive that her public defender had advised her to accept the plea bargain rather than risk additional charges. Lucas Reed had been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for drug trafficking and fraud. The cocaine found in his apartment had elevated his case from simple theft to narcotics distribution, and his pattern of targeting married women had attracted the attention of federal prosecutors looking to make examples of predatory criminals. Derek Walsh remained missing, though Vincent occasionally received reports from Rodriguez about sightings in Central America, where men with questionable pasts and cash to spend could disappear into communities that asked no questions about previous lives. Vincent's construction business had grown significantly over the past year, as word spread about his company's reliability and attention to detail. He'd hired 3 new employees and was considering expansion into commercial renovation projects. The legitimate income provided perfect cover for his other holdings, which had also grown through careful investment and strategic property acquisitions. Tyler knocked on the kitchen door frame, already dressed for school in jeans and a sweater that Patricia had bought him in Denver. "Morning, Dad." "Morning. Hungry." "Always." They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, the easy quiet of two people who understood each other completely. Tyler had inherited his father's ability to see through surface appearances to underlying truths, but he'd also developed his own moral code that was less ruthless than Vincent's and more forgiving than seemed practical. "I've been thinking about Mom," Tyler said as he finished his pancakes. "And I don't think I want to see her again. At least not for a while." Vincent nodded, unsurprised by his son's decision. "Any particular reason?" "She keeps asking me to convince you to give her another chance. She doesn't seem to understand that this isn't about forgiveness or second chances anymore. It's about consequences. She lost the right to ask for chances when she chose to plan my destruction instead of working on our problems." Tyler was quiet for a moment, processing his father's words with the careful consideration of someone who'd seen the price of poor choices. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret how you handled this? I mean, what happened to Uncle Derek and Lucas?" Vincent looked at his son, really looked at him, seeing the young man who was emerging from the boy who'd boarded a bus in Los Angeles 6 months earlier. Tyler was asking the question that Vincent had been expecting, the question that would determine what kind of relationship they would have going forward. "Tyler, your mother and her conspirators weren't planning to just divorce me and take half our assets. They were planning to destroy me completely, financially, emotionally, socially. Derek had researched ways to frame me for domestic violence, to make it look like I was hiding money offshore, to ensure that I lost custody of you and ended up with nothing. I know that. Lucas Reed wasn't just some personal trainer who fell for a married woman. He was a predator who specialized in targeting wives whose husbands had money. He'd done this before, multiple times, working with accomplices like Derek to systematically destroy families for profit." Tyler nodded slowly. "So you did what you had to do to protect us." "I did what I had to do to ensure that they could never threaten our family again." Vincent reached across the table and placed his hand over his son's. "But I want you to understand something important. The skills I used, the connections I called upon, the methods I employed, those are tools from a life I left behind for good reasons. I used them this time because our family was under attack, and there was no other way to protect what mattered most to me." "Which is what?" "You. Your future. The life we've built together that's honest and peaceful and everything I never thought I could have." Tyler squeezed his father's hand. "I understand, Dad, and I'm glad you protected us. I hope I never have to make those kinds of choices. If you're smart and careful and choose the right people to trust, you won't have to." Later that morning, after Tyler had left for school, Vincent received a phone call from Patricia in Denver. Brianna had been released from county jail and was living in a halfway house while serving the remainder of her sentence under supervised probation. She found work cleaning offices at night and had apparently been attending counseling sessions required by her plea agreement. "She asked me to give you a message," Patricia said. "I'm listening. She wants you to know that she understands why you did what you did, and she doesn't blame you for any of it. She says she knows she'll never see Tyler again, and she accepts that. But she wants you to tell him that she loves him and she's sorry for what her choices cost him." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, watching the mountains through his kitchen window. "Anything else?" "She asked me to tell you that she hopes someday you'll find someone who deserves the kind of loyalty you showed her, even after she betrayed it." "Patricia, I need you to give Brianna a message from me." "What is it?" "Tell her that I hope she finds peace with the choices she made, and that her life from this point forward is everything she's capable of making it. But tell her that chapter of my life is closed permanently, and any future contact should go through attorneys." "Vincent, she's broken. Completely broken. What happened to her in jail, what she's lost, I think she finally understands the real cost of what she did." "Understanding the cost doesn't eliminate the debt, Patricia. Some things can't be forgiven, can't be undone, can't be made right with time and good intentions." After hanging up, Vincent walked through his house, really seeing it for the first time in months. Every room had been repainted, refurnished, or renovated to remove any trace of Brianna's presence. The photographs on the walls now showed only Vincent and Tyler. Fishing trips, camping expeditions, moments of genuine happiness between father and son. In his study, Vincent opened a safe hidden behind a bookshelf and removed a thick folder containing documents that officially didn't exist. Inside were new identities for both himself and Tyler, detailed financial records for accounts in 3 countries, and contact information for people who could help them disappear completely if circumstances ever required it. Vincent had learned long ago that peace was not a permanent state, but a temporary condition that required constant vigilance to maintain. He'd built a good life in Colorado, a legitimate life that gave Tyler the chance to grow up without the shadows that had defined Vincent's own youth. But he'd also learned that some people would always choose destruction over construction, betrayal over loyalty, greed over love. The difference now was that Vincent Morrison was no longer the kind of man who could be betrayed without consequences. He was no longer the kind of man who would absorb damage to preserve relationships that had already been poisoned by deception. He was a man who protected what mattered to him with everything he possessed, who eliminated threats before they could destroy the people he loved, who understood that sometimes the price of peace was the willingness to do violence to those who would steal it. As evening approached and Tyler returned from school, Vincent Morrison closed the safe, locked away the tools of his former life, and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner for his son. They would eat together, talk about Tyler's day, maybe watch a movie or work on homework. It would be a normal evening in a normal house, the kind of peaceful domestic scene that Vincent had once thought was impossible for someone with his history. But peace, Vincent had learned, was not something you found. Peace was something you built, something you protected, something you were willing to fight for with everything you had. And Vincent Morrison had fought for his peace and won. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.